once had a dream that I went to the school of the devil. I'm not sure what brought that on, but it turned out to be a very interesting place. Nothing like how hell or the devil are usually portrayed. When I woke up, I wondered where these images had come from, and how the devil had become so objectified that you can find his fully accessorized look in any fancy dress shop. Was this a true reflection of who he is, or something we got carried away with? A way to remind ourselves of his terrifying nature, or a way to take it less serious? And is he really the personification of evil, or perhaps something else? I decided to go on a search through the maze of myth and meaning, looking for the clues that would uncover the real face of the devil. The entrance to the maze was the gate of preconceptions.
The devil is a tempter who wants to lead you astray.
The devil is your own worst self.
Talking about the devil brings bad luck.
The devil's about as real as the tooth fairy.
I remembered that the devil started out as an archangel called Lucifer, the most beautiful one, and that he was cast out of heaven after he rebelled against God out of pride. This is how evil was born. And so I'd always assumed that the Bible was where his story began. But in the maze, I found another book. It showed different gods from much older religions. Were these related to the devil? Had the Bible borrowed from these? Then I found the key that unlocked a meeting with the timekeeper.
The history of the devil is a rather young history in human story or human history. If we think back, the Old Testament and the earliest writings of the Old Testament, which are the books of Moses, and within the books of Moses, the oldest traditions in those books, none of those books refer to either the Satan or the devil. Of course, we think instantaneously of the book of Genesis with the serpent and the fall from the paradise. But the serpent has no traditional link to the devil or to Satan. But when Satan comes in, he is very much the same kind of Satan as you find it in Persia. He belongs to the council of gods. He represents both good and evil, justice. He's anything but an incorporation of evil. Now, where's evil coming from? People recognize we have illness and we have death and we are born and we suffer. The Old Testament in its oldest traditions had the same answer as the Zoroastrians. It has to be the one good God. But he himself incorporates the creative power and the destructive power. And early Christians in rejection of that idea start to extract the utter evilness and to park it in one entity, which is distinct from the divine. I mean, most of the ideas which we have about the devil today or Satan today have little or nothing to do with biblical writings, neither with the Old Testament nor with the New Testament. But they have a lot to do with writings which are not canonical, as we say, but writings which were popular narratives, folk narratives.
While looking for the next clue, I was thinking about how the idea of the Satan was so very different from the devil, how he represented a specific role on the divine council, a function, something you'd put on your CV. Well, not these days. They'd think you'd have wild orgies while worshipping the devil, celebrating evil, sacrificing humans. I mean, that's what Satanists do, don't they? Then I found a box. with a ram's head. and an invitation to meet the advocate.
The devil is a Christian character. Satanists don't believe in the devil. We are essentially an atheistic philosophy, so we reject any of those supernatural values. Satan, for us, he stands up for the just in humanity. You know, he points his finger at these faith-based religions and says, you know, all this is false. He doesn't exist in our minds. He doesn't exist as a metaphysical being or a supernatural being. He exists solely as a symbol representing man's true nature. The goat dates back to the priesthood of Mendes in ancient Egypt, the same representation of carnality, another form of Satan. I mean, throughout cultures, throughout history, Satan has been this symbol of evil, and I think it's probably a representation of that dark side of the human psyche that we perhaps, or a lot of people perhaps, have trouble facing. So they kind of symbolise it outside of themselves as a way of not really having to look at themselves. There's definitely something dark in man. We're not like the other animals. We're an animal just as any other animal is, but we are a human animal. And the reason we're dominant is because we're the most vicious animal. And I don't think you can take that away from us. It doesn't matter how much you try to pretty it up, which is what religions do. Is try to say you can be better than being human, you can aspire, you can ascend to this godhood, you can be like Jesus. And you know, the truth is, nobody can. It's an impossible pipe dream. Whereas I think it would be more pragmatic to sort of recognise this aspect of humanity that exists naturally in us and work pragmatically with that. And you know, for the Satanists, life should be a party. You're only here once, you're not here very long, relatively speaking. Life is short, but it's certainly not about going out and doing evil. We've got better things to do. We're focused on our own lives. We're not interested in going and burning down churches or graffiti in their churches. They're welcome to the churches. Those churches are open to criminals and drunkards and drug addicts and all those people who need help. They're welcome to those people. We don't want them.
I was beginning to think that our ideas about the devil were saying much more about us than about him. Wasn't he just something to project our fears onto? Something to blame? And especially a way to distance evil from ourselves, as if it's somehow not a human trait? Then I spotted something. And just as I wondered if it wasn't our very capacity for evil that part makes us human, I found a frame. It had a picture of Gandhi and a quote: "The only devils in this world are those running around in our hearts, and that is where all our battles should be fought." At the back, I found a pass to meet the soul guardian.
The image of the devil is very necessary in the human experience. It's an image of the archetype of evil, of darkness, and we live in a world of opposites. So, you know, God needs the devil and the devil needs God. Light needs darkness, darkness needs light, otherwise they wouldn't exist. Consciousness comes out of wrestling with the opposites, you know, the internal conflicts that we may struggle with. You know, on the one hand there's this, and on the other hand there's that. We have to wrestle and struggle and hold the tension of that struggle in order for consciousness to come out of that, for a realization, which brings up the, you know, Jungian idea of the shadow. And certainly in Jungian analytic work, one of the hardest things to do is to look at your own shadow. So you look at one's own potential for evil. We have to know our own, you know, our own shadow, our own demons, their own devils, their own angels, you know, all of those potentials and aspects of who we are as individuals. The danger of not addressing your shadow side is that it can compound. These things don't go away, so it compounds and can manifest in sort of concentrating or exaggerating the things that aren't going right for us in our relationships, in our life.
I was really struck by the idea that our inner darkness can live a life of its own if we either reject or ignore it. I wondered if there was anything else left for me to find. And then there it was, in the heart of the maze, some type of package. I thought of my dream about the school of the devil. A lot of what the timekeeper, the advocate, and the soul guardian had said seemed to echo the same lesson I had learned there, that the only way to deal with evil or darkness is to face it. For the real evil is the unawareness of evil. By seeking to understand how it is part of us, we become the hunter, not the hunted. That's why it's so important to reflect. For the face of the devil may well be your own reflection.